Zane, buddy, stay where I can see you, Felix Grant called from behind the counter, balancing 2 plates of grilled cheese and tomato soup on his arm. Zane, his 5-year-old son, was crouched by the diner's jukebox pretending it was a spaceship. Felix smiled faintly. In the faded teal booths and blinking neon lights of Maggie's Diner, Zane's imagination made everything less heavy. Felix weaved through the tables and dropped the plates in front of a couple of construction workers. Need anything else? One gave him a thumbs up, already halfway through his sandwich. Felix nodded and tucked the towel back into his apron. He was wiping down the counter when the bell over the door jingled. He glanced up and froze. A woman stepped inside, shaking off rain from her long coat. Her dark brown hair was pulled into a sleek ponytail, and her heels clicked against the tile like she didn't belong here. She looked around with a curious frown, then walked to the counter and slid onto a stool. Felix grabbed a menu and set it in front of her. "Welcome to Maggie's. Rain's coming down hard, huh?" She looked up, and her eyes caught his dark hazel, sharp but tired. "Yeah. My meeting got canceled, so I figured I'd stray off the highway a bit." "Lucky us," he said before he could stop himself. She raised a brow, the corner of her mouth twitching. "I'll have the special." Felix chuckled. "That's bold. You don't even know what it is." "I like bold," she said smoothly. "What's your name?" "Felix." "And you?" "Vanessa." He nodded. "All right, Vanessa. One special coming right up." He turned toward the kitchen, heart unexpectedly thudding. She looked like she belonged in a glass office with a skyline view, not eating lunch at a rundown roadside diner. But there was something about her, something real, despite the tailored coat and designer purse on the seat next to her. When he returned 10 minutes later with a plate of meatloaf and mashed potatoes, she was reading Zane's crayon drawings taped to the counter wall. "Your son?" she asked as he placed the food in front of her. "Yeah, that's his alien rocket dog. He swears it can fly to Mars." She smiled. "He's got talent. Don't tell him that. He'll draw on the fridge next." Vanessa took a bite of the meatloaf and paused. "This is actually really good." Felix leaned an elbow on the counter, pretending not to beam. "You sound surprised." "I'm from New York," she said between bites. "I'm used to overpriced salads and people who don't smile." "Well," Felix said, "we smile a lot around here. It's cheaper than therapy." Zane came running up then, tugging on his dad's apron. "Dad, the spaceship's out of gas." Felix crouched. "Then we should probably refuel. Want a color while I finish helping Vanessa?" Zane eyed her curiously. "Are you a space captain?" Vanessa blinked, then grinned. "Absolutely. But don't tell anyone. It's top secret." Zane giggled and ran back to his crayons. Felix looked at her, eyes softening. "You're good with kids." "I like them," she said. "They don't lie." He nodded and turned his attention to another customer, but he could feel her eyes on him. When the lunch rush slowed down, she was still there, sipping her coffee, watching Zane doodle with a quiet smile on her face. "You don't have to hang around," Felix said, sliding into the stool beside her. "I know," she replied, "but it's nice here." He studied her. "What do you do, Vanessa?" She hesitated. "I run a company." He squinted. "Like a small business?" "Something like that." He didn't push. He had no idea that the woman sitting at his counter had her name on half the skyscrapers in downtown Manhattan. They talked until Zane yawned and crawled into the booth to nap. Felix made her a slice of apple pie on the house, and when she left, she turned at the door. "I think I'll be back tomorrow," she said. "If that's okay." Felix smiled. "Yeah, I'd like that." The next day, she walked in again. And the day after that. She always ordered the special, always asked about Zane, and always stayed longer than she needed to. One night, he walked her to her car, rain drizzling lightly. "You don't belong in a place like this," he said, hands in his pockets. She leaned against her car door, staring at him. "Maybe, but I like how I feel when I'm here." He swallowed hard. "Vanessa, I'm just a guy trying to keep a roof over my kid's head." She stepped closer. "And I'm a woman who's tired of boardrooms and fake smiles." Their eyes locked. But before anything could pass between them, Zane called from the diner door. "Dad, I'm cold." Felix chuckled. "Duty calls." Vanessa smiled. "I'll see you tomorrow." And she did. Every day for the next 3 weeks, she came back. Until one afternoon, she didn't. Felix looked at the empty stool. He told himself she probably had a meeting, but she didn't come the next day either, or the day after that. By the 5th day, he was pacing behind the counter like a caged animal. Zane asked where the space captain went, and Felix didn't know what to say. Then one night, just before closing, a black SUV pulled up outside. Felix's heart jumped. Vanessa climbed out, hair in a bun, heels sharp against the pavement. She walked in, eyes slightly red. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I had to go back for meetings." Felix didn't say anything. He just walked around the counter and pulled her into a hug. "I missed this," she whispered. He pulled back enough to look her in the eyes. "I missed you." They stood there, the humming diner's lights buzzing above them, Zane watching from the booth with wide eyes. Vanessa leaned up and kissed Felix on the cheek. "Come to New York." "What?" He blinked. "Just for a weekend. Bring Zane." "I want to show you something." He hesitated. "I can't afford my treat," she said quickly. "Please." "Vanessa, I don't know what this is between us, but it's real," she interrupted. "That's all that matters." He looked at Zane, then back at her. "Okay," he said. "We'll come." She exhaled in relief. "Good. Because I don't think I can stand another day without seeing you." Felix didn't say anything, but he reached for her hand and held it tightly. Neither of them noticed Zane whisper to his crayon alien, "I think my dad likes the space captain." The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, ushering Felix and Zane into a world that didn't feel real. Felix had never stepped foot inside a building where the lobby ceiling brushed the clouds or where people moved like they just stepped off a runway. He held Zane's hand tightly, the little boy clutching a stuffed raccoon under one arm and a juice box in the other. Vanessa stood waiting near the reception desk, her coat draped over one arm, her heels silent against the marble as she crossed to meet them. "You found it," she said, eyes lighting up in a way Felix hadn't seen before. Zane waved his juice box. "We had snacks in the cab. The driver said he's never been to a building this tall." Felix gave her a look. "You didn't mention we'd be walking into a skyscraper." "I didn't want to scare you off," she said, reaching out to adjust the collar of his jacket. "Come on. I want to show you something." They followed her past a security desk and through a set of glass doors that opened into a private elevator. She pressed a button labeled PH and glanced down at Zane. "You okay with heights, Captain?" Zane nodded solemnly. "As long as I don't have to jump." The elevator whisked them upward without a sound. Felix tried not to fidget, aware of how out of place his thrifted jacket looked in the mirrored walls. Vanessa didn't seem to notice. She kept her eyes on him, like she was memorizing the way he breathed. The door slid open to reveal a penthouse of polished floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, and furniture that looked like it had never been sat on. Felix stepped inside slowly, trying not to let his jaw drop. "This is yours?" he asked. Vanessa stepped beside him. "One of them." He turned to her. "You said you ran a company. You didn't say you were this kind of successful. I didn't want that to be the first thing you knew about me." Zane wandered ahead, peering out the windows at the tiny yellow taxis below. "Do you live in the clouds?" Vanessa knelt beside him. "Close enough." "Want to see the rooftop garden?" "There's a garden?" Zane gasped. Felix watched them disappear toward a glass door and exhaled, scrubbing a hand down his face. Everything about this place felt like something out of a movie. He wasn't sure whether to be impressed or terrified. Vanessa returned a few minutes later without Zane. "He's with my housekeeper. She's got snacks and a movie ready for him." "I don't like leaving him with strangers," Felix said immediately. "She's not a stranger to me," Vanessa said gently. "And she's raised 4 kids of her own. He's safe, I promise." He nodded reluctantly, still uneasy. Vanessa walked to the window, her reflection hovering next to the skyline. "You want honesty?" she asked. "I think that's the only thing I can handle right now. I own a company that builds renewable energy systems. We operate globally. I have offices in 6 countries, a board of directors who want me to marry someone with a last name that opens doors, and a schedule that rarely allows for sleep." Felix blinked. "Why would you ever come to a roadside diner?" She looked at him then, her voice quiet. "Because I couldn't breathe in my own life. And then one day, I walked into a place where someone looked at me like I wasn't a project or a profit margin." He stepped closer. "You should have told me. I was afraid you'd treat me differently, that you'd think I was slumming for novelty. I don't care about your money." She studied him. "Then what do you care about?" He hesitated. "I care about the way you look at my son, the way you laugh when no one's watching. And I care about the fact that I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since the first time you walked in and ordered the special." Vanessa reached for his hand. "I didn't bring you here to impress you." "Then why?" His voice was low. "Because I want you to know who I am." All of it. And I want you to decide if you still want to see me once you do. Felix placed his hand on the window beside hers. You're complicated. And intimidating. And you make me feel like I'm standing in a place I don't belong. And I still want to be here. Vanessa's breath hitched. She stepped forward, resting her forehead against his. Then stay. At least for the weekend. He nodded slowly. Okay. They spent the rest of the evening in the rooftop garden, Zane chasing butterflies between rows of lavender and strawberries while Felix and Vanessa sat on a bench under a canopy of fairy lights. She told him stories of boardroom battles and sleepless nights. He told her about burnt toast mornings and fixing the diner's leaky roof with duct tape and prayer. By the time the sun dipped behind the skyline, Zane had fallen asleep in Vanessa's lap, and Felix had stopped questioning whether he belonged. For the first time in years, something felt possible, like the weight of survival could be replaced with something warmer. Vanessa looked down at the sleeping boy and then at Felix. There's something else I want to show you tomorrow, she said. He tilted his head. More skyscrapers? She smiled. No. Something that scares me more than those ever could. Felix reached across and brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. Then I'll be there. Neither of them knew it yet, but that promise would be tested sooner than either of them expected. And what Vanessa had to show him would change everything. The next morning, Vanessa didn't meet Felix in the penthouse kitchen or rooftop garden. Instead, a slim envelope with his name sat beside a plate of warm croissants and a glass of orange juice. Zane was still asleep in the guest room, curled beneath a blanket covered in cartoon astronauts, and the housekeeper quietly set the table without a word. Felix opened the envelope. Meet me at 11. Dress like you would for something important. I'll be waiting. There was no address, just a small black card with a gold emblem embossed in the corner and a driver already waiting downstairs. By the time the car pulled to a stop in front of a sleek glass building in Midtown, Felix's pulse had started to race. He adjusted the collar of his shirt borrowed from the guest room closet and stepped out onto the sidewalk, staring up at the building's mirrored facade. Inside, a receptionist greeted him by name, as if she'd been waiting. She's on the top floor, she said, already reaching for the elevator keycard. The ride up felt longer this time, not because of the height, but because of the weight in his chest. He couldn't explain why he was nervous. Vanessa had been nothing but open since he arrived. But something about being summoned here felt different. When the elevator opened, he stepped into a space so silent it made his footsteps echo. Floor-to-ceiling glass wrapped around the room. A long conference table stretched down the center, surrounded by high-backed leather chairs. And at the far end, standing with her back to him, was Vanessa. She turned when she heard the doors close. You came, she said. I wasn't sure if I should. I hoped you would. Felix stepped closer, taking in the view behind her. The skyline stretched endlessly, the city alive below. This is where you live when you're not hiding out in diners and gardens, he said. Vanessa nodded. It's where I make decisions that change people's lives. And you brought me here because... She walked to a cabinet and pulled out a thin folder, sliding it across the table in front of him. Felix hesitated before opening it. Inside were blueprints, contracts, and a photo of an empty lot surrounded by fencing. I've been planning to build a community center in that part of the city for years, Vanessa said. But every time I pitch it to the board, they shove it to the bottom of the pile. They say it doesn't generate enough return. Felix looked up. So why show me? Because I'm done waiting for permission, and I want you to run it. He blinked. Run it. You've built a life from scraps. You've kept your son fed and safe without help. You know what community means better than anyone on my payroll ever could. He closed the folder slowly. You're offering me a job? I'm offering you a purpose, she said. And a salary that means you'll never have to worry about Zane's next meal again. Felix leaned back, folding his arms. Why me? Vanessa hesitated. Because I trust you. And because if I'm going to do this, if I'm going to let someone inside the part of my life that's always been locked down, I want it to be someone who sees me, not my money. He stepped closer. And what happens when your board finds out you handed a multi-million-dollar project to a guy who used to fix leaky pipes with duct tape? They already know, she said. I told them last night. I told them the man I'm seeing is the most grounded, capable person I've ever met. And if they had a problem with that, they could take it up with someone else. Felix stared at her. You told them we're... I did, she said. Because I don't want to pretend anymore. Not here. Not with you. He didn't speak. Not right away. Instead, he walked to the window and looked out, hands on his hips. Vanessa came to stand beside him. You don't have to decide right now. I'm not worried about the job, he said. I'm worried about what happens when this stops feeling new. It won't, she said. Because I'm not looking for novelty. I'm looking for real. Felix turned to face her. And if I say yes? Then we build something together. Not just a center. A life. He stared at her for a long moment, then quietly said, I've never had anyone believe in me like this. Vanessa touched his jaw, voice soft. Then let me be the first. That night, Felix stood on the penthouse balcony, the lights of the city blinking below like stars. Zane sat beside him in his pajamas, swinging his feet. Is she your girlfriend now? Zane asked. Felix smiled to himself. Yeah, I think she is. She's really tall. She's not that tall. She talks like cartoons don't exist. Felix laughed. She's just from a different world. Zane leaned his head on his dad's arm. Are we going to live in this world now? I don't know, Felix said. Maybe we'll build our own. Behind them, Vanessa stepped quietly onto the balcony, wrapping her arms around Felix's waist from behind. He covered her hands with his own. No one said anything for a long while. The wind moved gently through the city, and for the first time in a long time, everything felt exactly where it was meant to be. The morning sun filtered through the penthouse windows in soft gold, casting long shadows across the hardwood floor. Felix stood barefoot in the kitchen, flipping pancakes while Zane sat at the marble island, humming to himself as he colored a sheet of paper with careful strokes. Vanessa entered quietly, her usual sleek ponytail replaced by loose waves falling over her shoulders, and a coffee mug already warm in her hands. You made breakfast? She asked, arching a brow as she leaned against the counter. I figured I owed you at least one meal cooked somewhere besides a diner, Felix said, sliding a pancake onto a plate. Vanessa took a sip of her coffee and tilted her head. You're staying longer than the weekend. He set the spatula down. Yeah, I am. She walked over and stood beside him, not reaching for the plate or the coffee. I wasn't sure if you'd say yes. Felix looked at her, his expression unreadable. I almost didn't, but then I thought about what I want Zane to learn from me, and I want him to know that it's okay to take a risk if it means building something better. Vanessa's shoulders dropped slightly, her gaze softening. You're not just building this center. You're helping me build a life I didn't think I could have. Zane looked up from his drawing. I drew you both, he announced, holding up a sketch of two stick figures holding hands in front of a building that had a big rainbow over it. Felix smiled. That's the community center? Yeah, Zane said proudly. It's gonna have a rocket slide and pancakes every day. Vanessa crouched beside him. We might need to consult the board on the pancake budget. Zane nodded seriously. I'll write them a letter. After breakfast, Vanessa left for a meeting, and Felix took Zane to the lot where the community center would stand. The air was cool, the city noise muffled by the tall buildings surrounding them. A crew was already there, unloading materials and marking the ground. You're the guy, one of the workers said as Felix approached. She said you'd be stopping by. Felix knelt beside Zane. What do you think? Zane squinted at the empty lot. It looks like dirt. He chuckled. It is. But soon, it won't be. Zane grabbed his hand. Can I help? You can be the official rocket slide inspector. Zane beamed. Back at the penthouse that night, Felix waited until Zane was asleep before joining Vanessa in her office. She sat cross-legged on the couch, a tablet in her lap, and a stack of reports beside her. You're working late, he said, closing the door behind him. This is early for me, she said without looking up. But I can stop. He sat across from her. Don't. I like watching you work. She set the tablet down. I've been thinking about something. Felix leaned forward. What kind of something? I want to step back from the board. He blinked. What? Not all the way, she clarified. But enough that I can focus on what matters. On us. On Zane. On the center. He was quiet for a moment. You've worked your whole life to build that company. And now I want to build something else, she said. Something that doesn't require me to sacrifice every part of myself to keep it alive. Felix studied her. You're serious. I've never been more. He reached for her hand. Then let's do it right. Together. The next few weeks were a blur of motion. Felix spent his days at the site, overseeing the early stages of construction, coordinating with volunteers, and outlining programs for kids, single parents, and displaced workers. Vanessa split her time between the office and the center, her presence quiet but unwavering. At night, they returned to the penthouse, where Zane recounted his adventures at school or his latest rocket dog theory. The three of them drifted into a rhythm that felt impossibly natural, like it had always been waiting for them to find it. One evening, Vanessa came home to find Felix and Zane asleep on the couch, a half-built Lego spaceship between them. She stood in the doorway for a long moment, her throat tight. This was what she'd never had. Not in boardrooms or penthouses or gala dinners. This quiet certainty that she belonged somewhere. She sat beside them and gently brushed a hand through Felix's hair. He stirred. "You okay?" "I'm more than okay." He sat up, blinking sleep from his eyes. "Something happened?" She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I've had this for a while. I just didn't know when the right time would be." Felix stared at the box. "Are you—" She opened it. Inside sat a ring, simple, elegant, without flash or excess. "I don't need a gala or a headline. I just need you." He didn't speak for a moment. Then he took the box from her hand and closed it gently. "You're not proposing to me," he said quietly. Vanessa's face fell. "I thought, you're not proposing," he repeated, standing and pulling her with him. "Because I'm proposing to you." Her breath caught. "You don't have a ring." "I don't need one." He took both her hands. "You walked into my life like a thunderstorm and showed me what it means to hope again. You didn't just fall for me. You fell for my sun, for my chaos, for the parts one thought were too broken to share. I want to be the man who makes you feel safe enough to rest. I want to build a home with you. So yes, I'll marry you." Vanessa laughed through the tears that slipped down her cheeks. "That's not how proposals work." "Then let's rewrite the rules." She kissed him, slow and certain. Zane stirred behind them and blinked up sleepily. "What's happening?" "We're getting married," Vanessa said, crouching beside him. Zane yawned. "Can I wear a cape?" Felix ruffled his hair. "Absolutely." Their wedding was small but perfect on the rooftop garden, beneath the string lights that had once lit their first quiet night together. Zane walked Vanessa down the aisle in a tiny tuxedo, clutching a bouquet of wildflowers he insisted on picking himself. As they exchanged vows, the city pulsed beneath them, alive with noise and light, but none of it mattered. Not compared to the life they had built above it all. Felix held Vanessa's hands and whispered, "You changed everything." She smiled through tears. "So did you." And with Zane cheering louder than anyone else, they kissed two people from opposite worlds, who had found something rare and real in the most unexpected place. A love that didn't ask for perfection, just truth, trust, and the promise to build something better together. 6 months later, the community center opened its doors for the very first time. The ribbon-cutting ceremony drew a crowd that spilled out onto the sidewalk. Families from neighboring boroughs, curious passers-by, local news crews, and even a few city officials. Balloons bobbed on the breeze, music played softly from a speaker system tucked near the entrance, and children darted between folding tables covered in art supplies and freshly baked cookies. Felix adjusted the collar of his blazer, one of two suits he now owned, and stood near the podium with Zane perched on his hip. The little boy wore a shirt that read, "Official Rocket Slide Inspector," and kept tugging at his sleeves with impatient excitement. Vanessa stood nearby in a pale blue dress that moved like water every time she turned. Her hair was pinned back in a loose twist, and her heels made her just tall enough to press a kiss to Felix's cheek without bending. "You nervous?" she asked, slipping her fingers through his. "I made pancakes for 100 people at 6 this morning," he murmured. "I've lost the ability to feel anything except syrup and adrenaline." She laughed and squeezed his hand. "You're going to be brilliant. You're biased." "I'm in love," she said simply. "It comes with the territory." When his name was called, Felix stepped up to the microphone, heart thudding in his chest. Zane gave him a double thumbs up from the front row, and Vanessa nodded once, steady and sure. He cleared his throat. "I used to think I'd never leave the diner. I thought that was going to be the only place I'd ever be able to provide for my son. I didn't grow up with much. I didn't expect much. And then someone walked into my life and reminded me that expectations aren't the same as limits." The crowd was quiet now, the kind of stillness that came from real attention. "This center isn't just a building," Felix continued. "It's a promise. That no matter where you're starting from, someone sees you. That you don't need a perfect life to deserve a place in this world. And that if you're willing to show up every day and give what you can, you'll find people who meet you there." He paused, swallowing the lump rising in his throat. "I'm grateful to the woman who believed in me before I believed in myself. And I'm grateful to all of you for showing up today to believe in this." He stepped back as the applause swelled, echoing off the glass walls like thunder. Vanessa joined him at the ribbon, oversized scissors already in hand. Zane stood between them, holding the red satin taut with exaggerated importance. Vanessa looked over at Felix. Ready? With you? Always. The ribbon fell with a single clean snip, and the doors opened. Inside, the center was everything they dreamed of. A library filled with donated books, art studios with bright walls and open shelves, a counseling wing staffed by professionals who volunteered their time, and a children's room so colorful it looked like it had been designed by Zane himself. As guests filtered in, Felix led a tour group through the main hallway, answering questions and pointing out features. Vanessa stayed near the entrance, greeting newcomers with a warmth that had become second nature since she'd started dividing her time between the boardroom and the city blocks that needed her most. Later that evening, once the last guests had left and the sun was dipping low behind the skyline, Felix found Vanessa sitting alone on the center's rooftop terrace. She had kicked off her heels and tucked her legs beneath her on a bench, a paper cup of lemonade in her hand and her eyes fixed on the horizon. He joined her without a word, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. She leaned into him, resting her head against his chest. You did it, he said quietly. No, she replied. We did. They sat there in silence for a while, the city humming softly around them. You ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't stopped at the diner that day? He asked. I would have kept driving, she said. Straight into another meeting. Another deadline. Another version of a life that didn't actually feel like mine. He kissed her temple. I'm glad you got lost. She turned toward him. I never told you what I did before I walked in. What? I was on my way to cancel an engagement dinner. Felix blinked. You were engaged? Almost. My father's idea. A man with the right name, the right pedigree. But I couldn't do it, not even for the sake of the company. So I left, pulled off the highway, and found you. He let out a low breath. That's one hell of a detour. Vanessa smiled. The best mistake I ever made. They stayed there until Zane came bounding up the stairs, holding something behind his back. I made you a surprise, he announced. Felix raised an eyebrow. Should we be nervous? Zane unveiled a hand-drawn sign with colorful letters that read, Felix plus Vanessa plus me equals family forever. Vanessa touched her chest. Is that our new name? Yep, Zane said proudly. We're the forever family. Felix pulled him into a hug, his voice thick. I like the sound of that. Zane looked up at them. Can we go back to the garden? Vanessa nodded. Of course we can. Weeks passed, then months. The center became a staple of the neighborhood, its programs growing, its reach expanding. Felix hired a team of staff and volunteers who cared about the mission as much as he did. Vanessa continued to serve on the company's board but passed the CEO title on to someone she trusted, choosing instead to invest her time where it counted most. Their wedding photos hung in the front hallway of the center, beside a plaque with all three of their names etched beneath the words, built on belief, sustained by love. Every Sunday, they hosted pancake breakfast in the community kitchen. Felix cooked. Vanessa poured coffee. Zane told jokes into a microphone that no one turned on, just to hear himself speak. They built a life that was messy and beautiful and full. And it was enough. More than enough. One night, long after the world had quieted, Felix stood on the porch of their brownstone, watching the stars blink above the city skyline. Vanessa came up behind him, arm sliding around his waist, her cheek pressed to his back. What are you thinking about? She whispered. How lucky I am. She turned him around and kissed him, slow and deliberate. You're not lucky, she said. You're loved. And he was. Every day. In every way.